Welcome, everybody, to His Purpose Prevails. My name is Pam Ying, and today I have a very special guest speaker. Before we begin, though, I want to remind you of the reason for this podcast. So, this podcast is to highlight mental health issues being Hmong, issues with the culture, different things about our identity. We will also talk about our faith and our journeys and our stories. And this is a Christian podcast. However, all stories, all points of view are welcome. And so the reason why we named it His Purpose Prevails is from the Bible verse Proverbs 19:21 that says, "Many are the plans in a person's heart, but it is the Lord's purpose that prevails." And so this is just a reminder to all of you and to me that I just believe the Lord has called me to this podcast and that He has blessed me with this podcast to allow guest speakers and people from all different worldviews to come together and to share stories and experiences. And all of this is to offer hope and encouragement to all of the viewers and those listening. So thank you so much for joining us. Again, today I have a special guest. Her name is Paaj Yaaj, and she and I met at Hmong Women Lead in Denver, Colorado a few weeks ago. And we were at the same hotel. And so she just so graciously offered to transport us to and from the event and to different places for lunch and food. And what caught my attention about Ba was just how bright and joyful she was and so positive. And then she started sharing her story, and that struck me even more. How could this woman be so positive and full of joy after what she had gone through and what she had overcome? So I immediately thought in my head, okay, I need to have her on my podcast. I need to have her on. If she agrees, I just need to have her on because I want her to share her story. I just want us all to welcome my amazing guest, Paaj Yaaj. And if you could, Pa, if you would just introduce yourself, and you are welcome to speak in Hmong too if you would like. But tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, so thank you. Thank you for having me on the podcast. And it's been it's been a long time and that I have wanted to share my story of survival and I just can't believe I'm here, right? I am actually, I came to the United States when I was about 4 years old with my parents, along with all the other Hmong families that have come due to displacement with the war. And so I am a lifelong educator living in Minnesota all my life, and then just recently transitioning into a new role in a nonprofit. So, yes, thank you for
Wonderful.
having me here.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited. Before we begin, I just want to go over a disclaimer for the viewers. I want the viewers to know that this content may be triggering. If there's anything we talk about today, please take care of yourself. If you need to leave the room, if you need to take a break, if you need to go grab some water, if you need to pause and come back to this later, please do that. Take care of yourself. Because we're going to be talking about divorce and remarriage and other wealth of information and experience that Ba has for us today, just know that we are not telling people to get divorced. And I think that is something that we need to do better at because I think the Hmong community really shames and stigmatizes those who have been divorced. And so I don't think anyone gets married with the thought of, oh, yeah, we're going to get divorced. I want to get divorced. So again, we are not telling people to get divorced. However, I think Ba would agree with me and she can share this, but we don't condone any violence. We don't condone violence, whether that's sexual, physical, psychological abuse. We just want to share stories and we want to break the stigma of divorce and the shame that comes with it. And so just because someone divorces does not make them a bad person. We need to be able to separate a person's experience and what they've done and what they've gone through from the person, right? And so we just need to do better to support one another, especially us Hmong women. We need to stick together. So I have not heard many people share their story of divorce, and I believe that is highly because of the stigma and the shame that comes from people in the Hmong community. So again, Ma, I just want to thank you so much for being here, and I will just hand over the floor to you.
I um I totally agree with what you said. We don't want to condone violence. and so forth. And we really want to try to create this image where, we are really hardworking Hmong women. I can't tell you how many, knowing, having friends from other racial groups and etc., how difficult being a Hmong woman is, right? Being able to balance our professional life with our home life, with our life of being a nya, and
Right.
everything else that we have to do. There's just so much that is involved in that. And so I'm just grateful that, I can start sharing my story because I have been healing for, probably 15 years. It's been a
Wow.
long time. And I would say within my journey, I actually would not have been able to share my journey earlier on because of the healing process. The healing can look differently from person to person, and the length of time can also be different as well. And so, through my journey, the last 10 years, doing a lot of work, especially around equity work, helping
Mhm.
me find my voice through equity work and healing through racial equity, trauma, etc. in the past, really actually in itself helped me heal the trauma within my own personal life. And
Yeah.
so being able to find that voice and trying to make sense of things when things weren't very clear in the past has really helped me find closure and find ways to let it go, to
Sure.
forgive people, forgive myself, and to move on. And so it's been a very long journey. And the healing, when you think about healing, it doesn't just happen overnight. It's not like I'm done healing from my last chapter and I'm moving on. I have no more healing to do. I feel like I'm always healing to another level as I go through my journey being a Hmong woman. Yeah.
Wow, that's great. I love how you highlight and emphasize healing. I do a lot of grief work with my clients, and I can tell if they haven't healed, and I can tell if I haven't healed because I won't go there unconsciously. I avoid or deflect or try to escape certain conversations that are hard or uncomfortable. And so I love that. I think healing is so amazing and people should really work. It takes work and time and effort, and it's not rainbows and butterflies, but it can be very difficult. But at the end of the day, there's such a great payoff. And I often tell clients, when you've experienced a negative event or traumatic event, that can bleed into different realms or domains of your life and relationships and work and school and your job. But if you heal, it can also, right? Like flow into other areas of your life. And so I'm hearing that you did some self-work and maybe some of it it was like your season to talk through some of the racial things and finding your worth as a Hmong woman compared to your non-Hmong counterparts. But that also, it helped to jumpstart or continue your healing with yourself and getting to know yourself and then other areas. So tell us more about, I mean, I would like to know kind of how the marriage started because I think, Hmong culture is very unique in that some Hmong women are getting married 13, 14, 15. My husband and I was married at the age of 15 and he was 16. We were culturally married, even though we weren't legally married. So tell us a little bit about like the marriage and how that began.
It was in the mid 1990s. I was right away graduated from high school and I ended up getting married because of my parents. I would I would say I chose to run away from my parents' life
Mm,
because it was very difficult.
mhm,
Now, growing up, especially in high school, my father had a restaurant and I worked, at the restaurant. I went to high school as usual, tried to keep up my grades. My mom worked night shifts, so I was taking care of my siblings. And to be able to balance everything was really, really hard. And then on top of that, in the 1990s, we started seeing a shift of Hmong men going to Laos to get married to these young Hmong women. And
Mm.
so when I was in high school, my father, he disappeared one day, went to Laos, and he got married to someone who was younger than I was.
Wow.
And I was devastated. I was devastated when I heard and, overhearing my parents. My dad wanted to get divorced on paper so that he can bring over his new wife. And I was just like, what does this all mean to me? I heard my cousin brother said to me, Bang, your parents are like messed up.
Mm.
And who would want to marry you? Back in the
Mm.
1990s, when I was growing up, it was like you would the message I would always get is don't get married until you're done with high school.
Mhm.
And so I didn't get married in high school. But once I finished high school and hearing all these messages from different people, it came to the point where do I stay with my parents and see the turmoil
Mhm.
happen
Mhm.
in the family, knowing that my parents were going to get divorced. And back in the 90s, you hardly saw parents get divorced. It was
Wow.
uncommon, right?
Sure.
And so I was dating my partner at the time, and we decided to get married.
Okay.
And I was 19. He was about the same age as well. And so we had gotten married. And now, as I reflect on it,
Mhm.
and I tell my daughters this too, don't get married because of your family's issues. Get married
Mm.
for the right reason. And for me at that time, I didn't have a good relationship with my mom because she was always working when I was in high
Mhm.
school. I was working weekends, and then she was working night shift Monday through Friday, and then we would never see each other. So we weren't even able to have conversations with one another
Mhm.
um, to prevent me from getting married. But in my mind, there was so much
Sure.
stigma of after you're 18, go young, go low, right?
Yes.
Your parents are so messed up. Who would want to marry you? There were so
Mhm.
many voices inside of my head that I'm just like, okay, I'm in love. I'm gonna, you know, run off and get married. But as I think about it, as I reflect back on that time frame, when you're young, you don't even know what love is. You
Right.
don't even understand what true love is. And
Mhm.
so that's something that I'm like, yes, I had gotten married for the wrong reason. And so
Mhm.
I wasn't prepared to be a nya.
Mhm.
Because being a nya at that age, I was pretty mature. I had taken care of raised my siblings.
Mhm.
I worked. I took care of my in-laws, helping them with translations, paperwork, and things like that. I also went to college to become
Mhm.
a teacher. And so
Okay.
being able to manage all that and then manage my life with my husband as well. And
Mhm.
so when I got married, we actually lived with my in-laws because
Okay.
traditionally, back in Laos and still in America, majority of the time you live with your in-laws because
Right.
one, we weren't financially prepared to,
Mhm.
to have a life where we had a stable income. We were still in college. We were, starting off with life. And so I lived with my in-laws for about 3 or 4 years
Okay.
before we actually ventured off into living by ourselves. And that only happened after I had my first daughter, and there wasn't room in the house, in the home to live. And so we went off on our own.
Yeah, so let's take a pause here because I think you said so many things that are impactful that we often don't think about in the moment. But when we, they say hindsight is 2020, when we take time to reflect. And so I'm hearing that, in the Hmong culture, it's so shame-based and it's about reputation and saving face. And so I do Hmong cultural competency trainings to professionals, whether it's law enforcement, medical professionals, other licensed mental health professionals. But I often say I highlight the shame component because shame doesn't just affect one person, it affects everyone, right? And so an act that your father did, going to Laos and marrying another wife, and your cousin brother, or I think you said he was saying, well, who would want to marry you? Your family's messed up. So now you're carrying shame from one act that your father did, right? But you're even sharing that before that because your mom worked nights, that you didn't build a relationship with her as you could have if you would have had more time. And I had this conversation with my mom too recently because my mom's like, I don't know what you were thinking marrying so young. And I said, Mom, who taught me my worth? Who taught me what to look for in a spouse or a partner? Who taught me that them talking to you like this is disrespectful or you don't accept that? I'm like, nobody taught me. And she's like, you're right. But, so I just want to highlight that because yeah, everyone feels shame from different cultures and ethnicities and races, but it's so highlighted in the monk community, and that fear of shame would cause us to try to run from that shame than to get the help we need, right? And I see a lot of
Yeah.
youth, they want mental health services, but it would bring shame upon their family. And so families are like, no, you don't need mental health. So unintentionally or indirectly, they're thinking, no, you don't need it. We're going to bypass your needs because we're afraid of what the world would say about us. So
Mhm.
I just thank you for bringing that forward and highlighting that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think if I had other women talk about shame, have other women share their story during that time frame, I probably wouldn't have gotten married, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it wasn't the case. And I think also one of the things that also was really hard growing up was because after I finished high school, I told my mom I didn't want to become a doctor or a lawyer like what she wanted, but I actually wanted to become a teacher. And I
Mm-hmm.
wanted to go away for college.
Mm-hmm.
And she's like, because I was a girl, she's like, no, you can't
Mm-hmm.
going away, in those days they want to protect us as girls. Our
Mm-hmm.
parents want to protect us from men, right? And predators. And so she said, no, you can't go away for college. So I think that is also another factor of why I had gotten married early too, because I was so like tied up to my family that I couldn't move out. I couldn't have
Sure.
this freedom like my other friends or my white friends were having. And I'm
Yes.
just like, I just want to be let loose and let go and
Yeah.
experience freedom. And so that was also something that I struggle with. And now with my girls, I'm like, go to college, save up your money, be independent, move out, have fun with your life. Don't get
Mm-hmm.
married because I'm chaining you to my house because I
Right.
know how that felt like when I was young. And so I think
Sure.
that also was another reason why I also left was because I felt so chained to the
Right.
family, given all the trauma, all the issues that was going on with my parents.
Mm-hmm.
And so of course, looking back, wasn't the best decision I made, but it was that time frame.
Sure. Well, and I would say I would challenge that thought to say that was the best decision you made given what you had at that time, right? Because we were not equipped. We did not have all of the tools and resources that our non-Hmong counterparts have, right? And so I love that you bring that up because I think so many of us Hmong women because we're the daughters and our parents see the world out of fear, like I'm afraid you're gonna get, you know, I'm afraid you're gonna get harmed. I'm afraid this is gonna happen. I'm afraid the world's gonna see. They just live under constant fear. And so I would say the same would be for me. I can relate to, I think I got married thinking it would be better and go you thought was she too so you can have fun, but I was really exchanging one hardship for another hardship, right? And so it's almost like this exchange, but you're hoping that you would have more freedom because you being the oldest, I mean, you were probably, you said you were raising your siblings, and so
Yep.
there's an added layer of responsibility that comes with that. Your mom's working, and so yeah, I don't think it's wrong for us to want to have fun or have a little bit of freedom, especially if we see like our white counterparts doing that, right? So I think
Absolutely.
even my mom said, she said, yeah, I married your dad because, well, my dad actually wanted Gina, so he like bride napped her. But she agreed to stay because she's like, yeah, kusaon shisu, but I didn't know that it was gonna be that.
Mhm.
Like, you know what I mean? And so, yeah, thank you for bringing that up. I think a lot of women can relate, Hmong women.
Yeah, definitely, definitely.
Yeah. So what happened? So you were sharing that you moved out, you had your first daughter, living with your in-laws. It was getting a little bit small and snug. And so you and your partner, your husband at that time, you moved out with your first child.
Yeah, so we moved out. I had gotten a job, a teaching job. We moved out, and life was okay for a time frame, for a time frame. And
Mhm.
I every year I kept on popping babies because we
Okay.
were growing our family. And
Yeah.
in the Hmong culture, the not being able to have kids is really hard.
Hmm.
And so, even the struggles with infertility, it's
Hmm.
like people don't even believe me. I have 7 children, and often I tell people that at my beginning stages, you after you get married for a couple of years, you don't plan to have any kids, but when you do want kids, kids don't want to come. And so
Yeah.
you have infertility issues, and then you have to go seek herbal remedies, and you have
Right.
to, do all those, even go see the doctor, etc. Um, and so I was like, I need to have kids
Hmm.
so my marriage can be stable, right? In
Hmm.
my mind, I thought having kids would stabilize my marriage because, of course, when you get married, you want to have kids.
Hmm.
But then the first kid came out, it was a girl. It
Okay.
was a joy of our life. We love her. He loved
Yeah.
her, everything. And then the second kid came out and it was a daughter.
Okay.
And it was still lots of love and everything. And then the third child came out, another girl.
Hmm.
And by this time, my partner at the time, knowing that he really, really wanted a boy.
Hmm.
And not being able to conceive a boy by the third try, it was just very, very hard. It was hard. I love my
Yes.
girls to death. I would never trade them for
Hmm.
boys, but it was just really hard culturally, not being able to conceive boys. And
Yeah.
so by the time the second and the third daughter came out,
Hmm.
he had his first affair that I had known of.
Okay.
And I was devastated. I was
Hmm.
devastated. And I remember at that time, I I told my mother-in-law and my mom and everyone's like, oh, it's like that's like, it's like your father-in-law did it, your father did it, it's just like,
Mhm.
oh, so Shande. So they want me to just have long temper and just put up with this.
Wow. So
And
yeah, I want to pause there because I think they think, well, we went through it. So they normalize infidelity and they say, well, if we went through it and we lived, you can do it too. And I think that's unfair. I think we get to choose what's acceptable and unacceptable. And so just because you went through it and survived doesn't mean that it's right or that it's fair or that I should go through the same thing too. So yeah, that's devastating. That's so hard to hear. And I want to go back because you had talked about the shame and stigma. I think some Hmong people, when you first get married, they're like, when are you going to get pregnant? Right? And so we have this obligation right off the bat as Hmong women to begin having children. And
Mhm.
then you're saying it's a two-part thing because now you are having children, but now it's not a boy,
Mhm.
right? And I've heard people say, well, có yếu tố gì là có mong, có yếu sai thì, có thể có mong, right? So they'll
Mhm.
say, if you have a daughter, it's the blessing for the husband, and if you have a son, it's a blessing for the wife. But I want to dispel this myth that it's the women's fault for not having a boy because medically, right? I just learned this a few years ago. Medically,
Mhm.
it's the male that gives us the X or Y chromosome. And so it's actually their sperm that would dictate whether it's a boy or girl. So I've jokingly said to my husband, because because it's your sperm giving me the X or Y chromosome. So I joke about that, but I think we need to dispel that myth that we're defective because it's like one, you're defective if you can't have kids, and then if you can, now you're defective because you can't have a
Mhm.
boy. So
Yeah.
sorry to interrupt you, but I thought that
No,
was so
no,
important to highlight.
absolutely. I think that was an excuse and escape for his behavior. That's all it was.
Yeah.
Um, and so forth. So it is what it is. And like I said, I would not trade my five daughters for five boys. I love my girl to death. Out of out of that marriage, that was a blessing in disguise.
Oh,
Mm.
sure. That was good that came out of the marriage. Five beautiful girls.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So then you said I had known about this affair. So it sounds like this was the beginning of affairs. And so you learned about this new affair.
Yeah, so I learned about it, and like as what we were just talking earlier, that I talked to my in-laws and I talked to my mom, and they all said the same thing. And the
Mhm.
word that they said was "Chonichi yosamama." Like
Yes.
as long as he doesn't marry her, right?
Mhm.
He can have infidelity affairs, but as long as he doesn't marry her. And I'm
Mhm.
like, okay, someday, if he finds the right person, he will marry them, right? In my mind, I'm like that.
Yeah.
And so that was the point where I that was the first time in my marriage that I was like, nope, I don't want to be in this marriage. I don't
Okay.
want to put up with this. And then my mom and my in-law, my mother-in-law, they told me to shinde, and so okay, I'll give it a try. So
So
after.
let's pause there because you had something in you that said this was not right. This is not right. My
Mhm.
mother-in-law mom is telling me as long as he doesn't remarry, if he doesn't go after her and marry her, then it's fine. But I think that they don't know that they're doing this, but that is putting a damper on your worth. It's saying, well, you're not worthy enough to have somebody who's faithful and loyal. So just settle. He's as long as he doesn't marry her, right? And but you had something in you very early on that was like, I don't want to be married if he's going to be cheating on me. I don't want this life. I don't want this marriage.
Yeah. And then afterwards, I kept on thinking to myself, oh, he'll change. Or I kept on thinking the next time I'm gonna go in mature so I can have a boy. Those were the
Mm,
two things that came into my mind. I'm like, I can make this work. He'll change. After I have a boy, he won't go and cheat again. Because
mm,
when I confronted him, he said, he, it's like, oh, I'm it's like, they don't want to admit it, but you already know. And
mhm,
so they're like, okay, we'll restart, or um, okay, I'll let it go. I won't do
Mm.
it again. And so
Or
it's like,
she said sometimes
yes,
they'll say,
yes,
or she
yes.
said, yeah.
And so it's like, okay, then it's like, okay, let's restart. Let's try it again. I'll forgive you, right?
Okay. Yeah, because you women, we don't want to get a divorce. Like we don't want to be cheated on, but normally we don't want to get a divorce. We want to try to keep it together, keep our family together. And so you're like, okay, I'll forgive. Maybe if I just have a son for him, or so you're having like this internal dialogue, but again, it's almost like you're placing the blame on you. Like maybe if I had a son, right? Instead of focusing on, okay, what's his issue? Why is he cheating? Something's happening within him, or something's wrong with him or the culture or the traditions. But again, see, us women, we want to fix and we want to keep our family together, and then we blame ourselves.
Yeah, and oftentimes, like being a teacher, I often describe to my white counterparts, my white colleagues, that,
Mm-hmm.
for me, I felt like the minute I walked into school, I
Mm-hmm.
could be this Hmong American woman. I could speak
Mm-hmm.
my mind. I could, I could be the best that I can be,
Mm-hmm.
and have this freedom to
Mm-hmm.
excel in my professional career, etc. But
Mm-hmm.
the minute I come back home, I'm just another Hmong woman who
Wow.
don't have a voice, who have to live under her partner, the
Mm-hmm.
culture, the family, what they say, what they want, you know, my marriage to be like. And I felt so conflicted.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, how can I be like have so much freedom 7 until 3 every single day and then come home and feel like I'm powerless. So inside I
Wow.
was struggling with this for years and
Yeah.
years.
What a stark difference. What a huge contrast to be able to, you're a professional, you're experienced, you have gone to school, you know what you're doing, and you can speak, you can add to meetings, you can give your opinion to things, but then yeah, how you have to transition. And I share that too. I say, us Hmong, especially the Hmong youth, right? If they feel safe with you, you will see a whole different person than
Mhm.
when they're at home with their family. Because then we have to adjust, we have to pivot, and we have to be acceptable in our culture. So yeah, that is powerful.
Yeah, absolutely. So moving forward,
Mm.
um, that we close that chapter, restart again.
Okay.
And this time, you know, I think as a person, when I love somebody, I really love them unconditionally. I
Mm-hmm.
forgive them. I love them. And I've always been taught, like, as a Hmong daughter,
Mm-hmm.
that you take care of your husband. So I took care of all his clothes. I cooked every single meal every night, every on the weekends. I was this that was always showing up to events, helping out with the kati. I was and raising my children,
Mm-hmm.
um, mostly by myself because my ex-husband, he would say he would have he would have full-time job and a part-time job,
Mm-hmm.
which he did, but doing that allowed him to never be home and always be gone, right? And so I was taught to be this really good daughter-in-law, but because I was taught to be this really good daughter-in-law, I wasn't meeting his needs because
Mm-hmm.
I was so busy with my professional life, going back to school, taking care
Mm-hmm.
of my children, raising all my girls, with my in-laws, cooking, cleaning the house, keeping my house spotless.
Wow.
And at the end of the day, we're not taught to remember to take care of our husbands
Mm-hmm.
in a way that doesn't allow them to leave us. And so, now that I reflect on it, and I learn about, what are these men needs, right? You
Mm-hmm.
have to also make sure that that is also a part of your balancing life and everything. But we
Mm-hmm.
get so tired. At the end of the
Right.
day, we get so tired. And so I know a lot of women struggle with this. And then
Mm-hmm.
making sure that you do balance that your partner's need as well, because
Sure.
that is also super important in the relationship.
Yeah, so you were either in school or a full-time employee. You were a nya, daughter-in-law to your in-laws. You had to raise these children. You were cooking and cleaning and ironing and then doing laundry for your husband. And he had a full-time job and then this part-time job where he was always gone. You barely could meet your own needs, but now you're saying you couldn't meet your partner's needs, your ex-husband's needs. That's a lot. And I think my mom and sister had said to me, because I remember being in that too, and my mom was like, but you have a full-time job. And she validated me for the first time, which was mind-blowing, but it was also very powerful for her to say that. And so, yeah, I will say that to my mother-in-law and other people who are like, oh, you need to do this and this. And I'm like, yeah, but in Laos, in the old country, you guys didn't have a full-time job, but you still want us to carry over those traditions in addition to having a full-time job. And some women, they're having a full-time job and going to school part-time or vice versa. And so here you are, you're being a dutiful wife and daughter-in-law, and you're saying, I'm not meeting his needs. And so maybe now he's going out and getting it out there.
Yeah, and I did everything what he wanted at home, right?
Mhm.
Clean house. I was cooking for the family. I was doing all of that, for what a good, wife was supposed to do. But at the end of the day, what I realized was that I loved him so unconditionally, so
Mhm.
much that I would do all these things to make him happy. And
Yeah.
at the end of the day, he wasn't completely happy. And that
Mm.
in doing that, I forgot to love myself. And this
Right.
is so critical because when you love everybody else, I had a friend who stopped me and said, Ping, you love everybody else except you. That was
Mhm.
the biggest wake up call conversation I had with this friend.
Mhm.
And I realized that that was true.
Mhm.
I did not make time for me. I did not take care of myself to look good. I didn't
Mhm.
take care of myself to feel relaxed because I was always on the go, 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 go. There was never a time where I'm just like relaxing to take care of me.
Mhm.
And
Mm.
I realized that that was something that I also um didn't have, didn't do during that time frame that was so critical.
Sure.
And because I didn't have that, when things got really hard, it
Mhm.
really pulled me down to depression. So
Wow.
moving forward, we moved to a new place, a new start, and
Okay.
that cheating came back.
Mm.
And so this time and being as busy as I am,
Mhm.
sometimes women say, "How come you didn't know?" And because you're so busy in everything, he
Mhm.
was working one and a half job, a full-time job, a part-time job. He was out and about in the community all the
Mhm.
time. And so you just believe that, you know what, he's going to change.
Yeah.
And then when things didn't go well, when things started to add up
Mhm.
and he's having another affair, and everybody around me knew that he was having an affair, but I didn't know. Nobody wanted to tell
Mhm.
me. And
Okay.
then when I did find out, that's when my mental health crashed. And I realized it crashed because I didn't have any self-love.
Mm.
No matter how much he was hurting me with this
Mhm.
other person, no
Mhm.
matter all the lies, all the toxicity he was giving me, I still loved him.
Um,
unconditionally.
okay,
But
let's stop here.
but I didn't love myself.
Yeah, yeah. Let's stop here because I want to come back to it. But I also want to highlight something. Pa and Ping, we're going to use that interchangeably for our viewers in case they get confused. But Pa is your Hmong name in Moling in Green Hmong, and then Ping is what probably your white counterparts or
Yes.
people at work call you. So I just want to highlight this because I don't think we give us ourselves enough credit, and I don't think people give us Hmong women enough credit. The reason why your husband was able to have 1.5 jobs was because you were running everything at home. You were taking care of everything, which gave him the ability and the ease to go out in the community and do everything he was doing. And we don't give ourselves enough credit. And so we are like the engine at home working. We are like a well-oiled machine, making everything smooth for our partners to go out there and to be leaders in the community and to go move to let them in, right? And all of these things. We let them do that. That's because we take care. So we take care of things at home. So imagine if you were a drug addict or you were having an affair or your children were getting um, like let's say CPS was involved, your husband would not have the ease to go and do all of these things in the community. But because you held it down and you took care of business, that's how he had the ease. So I just want us to give ourselves credit for that. And I think we are our husband's backbones. We hold them up, we prop them up. They get to be in the spotlight, they get the credit, the accolades, and all of that. And we don't want that. We don't ask for that. But that is when you know you have a strong woman behind you, how people can be great leaders, quotation marks, great leaders, is because of the support they have. So I just wanted to acknowledge that in case no one has ever acknowledged or validated that. But he was able to do everything because of you. And so I just want you to know that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know that I just I just do so much
Hmm.
so that so that I can have that this American dream that we always talk about, right?
Hmm.
Have the degrees that we have the family, the dream family, the children that we want, and everything. And at the end of the day, because of all these cultural things that come into play,
Hmm.
I didn't have that American dream. I was
Yeah.
struggling so much in everything that was happening, and I
Hmm.
was not happy. I
Hmm.
was not happy running all the time, going 110 miles all the time. I was miserable, but
Hmm.
I didn't have time to talk it through with people, right?
Yeah.
Um, or to stop and say, hey, what do I need to change? And yeah, so moving forward, um, after I had found out, that he was having another affair, I ended up with my last daughter.
Hmm.
I was pregnant again. So I had three kids with with the first affair, living in the last house, and then I had two more kids. And so the fourth child came, it was another daughter. And
Okay.
through all my pregnancy, he never went with me to any ultrasound, any doctor's appointment. I was
Hmm.
always alone in
Hmm.
the journey. And finally, by the last daughter, he got to the hospital. He was asking me, "Oh, is this a boy or a girl?" I said, "I don't know." But I knew.
Hmm.
I didn't want to tell, tell the reality until the baby came out. And he got to the hospital and the baby came out and it was a girl and he left.
Wow.
And that was one of the most heartbreaking um points in my life.
Yeah.
That because it was a girl, he didn't value. And
Mm.
that was probably the day that I realized I don't want to have any more kids with him. I don't want to keep on having kids and having kids because it may never be a boy
Mhm.
and so forth. So I fell into a deep depression during that year, a really deep depression, knowing that my marriage will collapse. That
Mm.
was my realization moment. But I still was hopeful and thinking that, you know what, maybe someday he'll change. Maybe
Mhm.
someday this is just another affair, another phase. Maybe he'll come back. But after that, after my last daughter, I knew that we won't make it.
Okay. So you got another gift, another daughter, another gift
I
into the
did.
world. And when he learned it was a girl, he just walked out. And I mean, literally walked out, but almost that's like walking out on the family.
Yeah.
That if this is a daughter, then she's not valuable. You're not valuable. You're not worth my time. I'm gonna go spend my time somewhere else.
Mhm. Absolutely.
Wow.
And through it all, through my depression, I got really, really depressed after that. I
Mm-hmm.
think postpartum depression exists,
Mm-hmm.
especially if we are having all these things happen in our lives.
Right.
I also, people also say, why do you keep on popping kids, more kids, knowing that, you know, that he wanted boys. Well, because I just kept on having this hope that the next one will be a boy, the next one will be a
Yeah.
boy, because I wanted my marriage to work out. I didn't
Mm-hmm.
want to be this bundle because everyone was giving it a bad name, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I
Mm-hmm.
kept on having hope. And in his mind, he thought that by, having all these kids, that he could do what he could live the life he wanted to live, and that I could not leave him
Okay.
because of so many kids that I would just it would keep me from leaving him,
Hmm.
divorcing him. In his mind,
Wow. That's so
that's what he was
interesting.
thinking.
That's so interesting. That's something I'm confused about. Men still want the marriage and they want you to have kids so they can maintain control over you so you can't leave them. But all of his actions are saying he doesn't want you and the kids. He literally left you when he learned it was another girl. He's literally out there being whoever he's trying to be in the community and he's having an affair. So all of these to me communicate that you don't want me or this family, but at the same time men will use children as a way to control you so that you are bound to them and you can't leave them. So that is just so, I mean, maybe it's their ego and pride thing, but it's like they want you, but they don't want you. So to me, I'm just confused.
Yeah, absolutely. And it was just like really mixed feelings and so forth.
Mm-hmm.
And it just didn't make sense, right? But I kept on having hope. But after my last daughter, I just said, nope, no more.
Okay.
And what happened also, going back to the depression, right? So I had my last daughter, depression kicked in because
Mm-hmm.
during this time frame, I knew he was having an affair and he started to change. And I would say that when you first get married, when you're young, love is different.
Mm-hmm.
Love is different. You didn't have I didn't see him as a cheater, etc. But as time goes on, things change. Your love changes, like the
Sure.
seasons, right?
Yeah.
And so now that he has um a mistress, it was like he changed. He was a changed person. He
Mm.
never abused me ever
Okay.
in our
Okay.
marriage. And he started to come in and mentally abuse me. He told me, you know what? You are the most disgusting woman, the most ugliest woman. Nobody would ever marry you
Mm.
if you left me. He would say things
Mm.
like that. He would say, yeah, I keep on crying because he would say things that were so heartbreaking to me,
Yeah.
but still, I couldn't cut my unconditional love out of, from him. He
Yeah.
would he would start coming in one time he would one time he hit me. He
Mm,
physically hit me and I had a bruise on my face, on
okay.
right by my eye here. And I was just like, this isn't the man I married years
Mm,
ago.
mm-hmm,
This isn't this person I love.
mm-hmm.
And so I was just I was just like, why? I was just like, why am I putting myself through this? But
Yeah.
at that same time, I couldn't cut my unconditional love from him because I loved his family.
Mm-hmm,
I didn't want my girls to not have a dad. I didn't want to be a bundle because of the
mm-hmm.
stigma.
Right.
And I just kept on staying. And I thought, what would I do? How could I pay all the bills if I didn't have a second income?
Mm-hmm,
You know, my husband helping with some of the bills. So I'm like, there were so many things going on. And even through all of the things that I already saw as red flags,
mm-hmm.
I couldn't call it quits
Sure.
yet.
Yeah. Yeah. You make such a valid point because there's so many things that grow through our mind. Leaving isn't easy, right? And you're saying, I've built relationships with his family. I like his family. I love them. I have 5 kids, right? I don't want my children not to have a father. I only have one income. Like, what would that look like without the second income? And so, even though he abused you, he cheated, he's left you, abandoned you, neglected you, you are still trying to find reasons to stay. And there's all of these reasons of why it's so difficult to leave.
And then I think that's something that when people see domestic violence
Mm-hmm.
situation, why didn't they leave? Well,
Mm-hmm.
you can't just pick up and leave. There's a
Right.
process, a psychological process that goes through your mind. Everything kind of has to fall into place for you to
Yeah.
make that bold decision to leave and to never come back. Because a lot of
Mm-hmm.
women, sometimes they go and then
Mm-hmm.
they end up coming back and it gets worse and worse and worse. And then they
Yeah.
go again, they end up coming
Yeah.
back and so forth. So that's something that I didn't want to do. And people were like, why don't you just kick him out of the house? I'm like, I don't want to have that reputation of calling the police and kicking him out. So that
Mm-hmm.
was also another thing as well.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was trying to struggle with a lot of different things. And at one point in my life, in during that journey of that
Mm-hmm.
my mental health journey, I got so depressed
Mm-hmm.
that I actually said, I don't want to live anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And I was ready to take my life so many times,
Wow.
wanting to overdose myself. And
Mm-hmm.
every time I tried, I would tell my mom and my mother-in-law, and they would tell me how stupid I was. And my mother-in-law said one thing that really woke me up. She said, yeah, why would you want to take your life? If you take your life, I'll never love your daughters. And I know that's
Um,
not true. She loves my girls to death.
yeah.
But she had to say that to wake me up. And it did wake
Mm-hmm.
me up.
Mm-hmm.
It did wake me up. And that's when I stopped. That's when I stopped, you know, trying to trying to take on these suicide attempts.
Okay.
And this is all while trying to do everything else in life, right? And
Yeah.
so I ended up realizing that, you know what? I can't I have to live for my children. If
Mm-hmm.
I die, who's gonna love my kids as much as I
Mm-hmm.
do? My mother-in-law loves my kids, my their aunties, my mom, they love my kids, but nothing compared to me. I have
Right.
to live for my kids. So
Mm-hmm.
I realized that. And then I had another friend who told me, Ping, you gotta love yourself. So I ended up going by, after that conversation with this other friend, I ended up going to buy brand new clothes,
Mm-hmm.
spending money, lots of money on makeup.
Mm-hmm.
Man, I lost that summer with my depression. I lost about 30 pounds within that
Okay.
summer. And
Mm-hmm.
I ended up loving myself. And that felt so good not to have to ask him, for permission to
Mm.
go out and buy clothes, to go
Mm-hmm.
out and buy makeup. Because
Mm-hmm.
it was always, yes, you can buy it, no, you can't. And
Okay.
so now it was like, I don't care. I'm going to take care of myself. And I
Mm-hmm.
started loving myself from the inside out. And I was already in my 30s. I've never had a pedicure.
Mm.
So my friend took me out for a pedicure. I'm like, oh my God, what have I been missing in life?
Yeah.
And so that self-care
Mm-hmm.
saved me. It
Mm.
saved me because now I started, my mother-in-law said, yeah, who cares about what he does?
Mm-hmm.
You do what you need to do. So I started taking care of myself, taking better care of my girls.
Okay.
Um, and I just realized that, it begins with me. And through our marriage, with during this time frame, the theme, the relatives also came and talked about how we're going to fix your marriage.
Mm.
And it was everything that I had to do to change
Oh,
the
yeah.
marriage. And even they suggested things for him, but obviously he didn't take on their, advice
Right.
and so forth. And so it was always, and on the inside, it felt like I wasn't enough. I
Mm.
wasn't good enough.
Mm-hmm.
That's why you were doing this and everything. And so I ended up, so I just kept with it for quite some time, for a period of time. And then it came to the point, and here's my breaking point.
Okay.
And my breaking point is the day that I decided that
Mm.
I have the power to choose to not live in the marriage, to
Okay.
choose to leave because I
Mm-hmm.
can,
Mm-hmm.
regardless of what people say,
Mm-hmm.
because I
Yeah.
don't care anymore. My mental health had gotten so bad
Yeah.
that it's either I leave or I will die
Mm.
in this marriage, whether it's by domestic violence, murder, suicide,
Yeah.
or overdosing myself. So I
Okay.
knew my my outlook was very bleak. And I also realized that I was in my early 30s. I realized that if I forecast my life,
Mm-hmm.
when I'm 40, I'll probably be broke and not have this American dream. I'll
Mm.
probably be dead by then. I was forecasting
Wow.
my life ahead.
Yeah.
And so,
So it's
uh,
literally life or death.
yes,
Yeah.
it was life or
Before
death.
before you get there, I want to go back to loving yourself because I think our viewers and listeners need to hear this. Your mother-in-law gave you permission. She said, "Don't worry about your husband. Take care of yourself. Do what you need to do." And so, and your friend, you had a friend come and she took you for a pedicure. And so, but you also said, though you were doing things like buying makeup and clothes and getting pedicures and you were caring for yourself on the outside, which is a form of self-care, but you were also saying it was an internal process too. And I want to highlight that because I think a lot of us women, we say, well, that money could go towards our kids, or that would just be a waste, or I really don't need makeup, and so we make all of these excuses as to why we shouldn't take care of ourselves. But there was this internal process, and you mentioned earlier there was a psychological process that you were going through. And in taking care of yourself, you must have found something inside that said, actually, I am worthy. Like, I can get a pedicure and I am worth it. I can have new clothes, right? And so I think internally you had to accept that you were worthy to be able to do things externally, but there was this psychological process that continued. And now you're telling us you've got the final straw. You're saying, um, this has all happened. You loved him unconditionally. You didn't want to get divorced. You had all of this hope. But then now there was this realization of like, it's going to be life or death.
Mhm.
Either I'm going to live or I'm not going to live, and I need to make a decision. And so I always I was asking you when we were together in person. I'm like, what's the final straw? Because I have clients and they're coming in and they tell me all of these horrible things, and in my mind, I'm like, okay, why are you still with them? But you said they just it hasn't been the final straw. So tell
Mhm.
us about the final straw. You said life or death. So go ahead,
Mhm.
continue.
I'm going to backtrack a little bit before the
Okay.
final straw. Um,
Okay.
People often ask me, why don't you cheat? Your
Mm.
ex-husband's cheating. Why don't you just cheat on him
Yeah.
to make it
Yeah.
even? And in my mind, in my values, I don't see how that can make it better, how
Yeah.
that can make the relationship better, how that can make the situation better. And in
Hmm.
actuality, if you look at the murder, suicide, domestic violence cases in the United States with Hmong family, with the Hmong, it's because sometimes some of the cases, the husband's cheating and then the wife cheats and then more drama is added, right? So in my mind, I'm like, I'm I don't want this reputation of, oh yeah, he cheated, so she cheated too, and so
Hmm.
forth. So because I want to leave on a clean slate. I
Yeah.
want to make sure that because it's not a part of my value. I'm like, I hate it because my
Mm.
father cheated on my mom. And
Right.
and I'm like, why would I want to make things worse? And so that's why I chose to ignore him
Hmm.
and focus on me and my children and my self-loving myself. So
Hmm.
now to the that last straw. And
Yeah,
so the
I
Mhm,
just want to say I totally agree with you. Two wrongs don't make a right. I'm not here to judge women that did cheat, but two wrongs don't make a right. But you're saying if I'm gonna leave, I'm gonna leave with a clear conscience, right?
mhm,
Like he can do the bad, he can cheat on me, but I'm not gonna do that because my morals, my value and belief
yeah,
system, that doesn't align with me. So you stuck with who you are in your value system. Yeah.
absolutely, absolutely.
All right. The
So that
final
last
straw.
straw, yeah, that
Yeah,
last
the
straw.
last straw.
Um, remember it was an afternoon where he wanted to go and I said, not so fast. You're
Hmm.
not going. And this is the first time I've actually, told him he can't go.
Okay.
Because usually I never had a voice.
Hmm.
I could never speak up. And so I just said, you can't go. And he got really, really upset at me. My children were all in front of this confrontation. And he took out his gun
Oh, wow.
and put it to my head
That's so scary.
in front of all my kids, all my girls. And I said, and they were still very young, under 12.
Okay.
And I just realized that, if I don't, if I don't leave,
Hmm.
I will be the next murder suicide victim.
Hmm.
I realized that because he had a dozen guns in the house, all
Wow.
locked up in his safe. But that was my realization.
Okay.
And so I didn't argue. I let him go.
Okay.
And that night, I called his grandpa and
Hmm.
I said to his grandpa, I've done everything you guys wanted me to be this perfect yeah, to change for him. I tried everything. And I will let you know that if I stay any longer,
Hmm.
you guys will have to bury me
Hmm.
because I cannot put up with this crap anymore.
Yeah.
And
Wow.
so grandpa says, yeah, we know it's not you. It's our son. Go and do what you need to do.
Okay.
And those were the words that allowed me to free me,
Hmm.
to make a plan to leave.
Okay.
That's
Wow.
what I
So
needed. Hmm.
do you feel like, because I think us Hmong people, 俾唔窿路啦, yeah, like we we are so Like we listen, we follow rules, we follow directions. And here you are sharing with his grandfather, right? Was this his grandfather or your father-in-law?
A cousin grandfather who was in charge of the relatives.
Okay. Okay. So he was a leader. He was one of the
Yeah.
or
Mhm.
in his clan, he was a leader. And they supported you. And so they could see your goodness, even though your husband couldn't. And they could see his badness, even though they may not have told him or held him accountable. But it was like a blessing from a leader, an elderly person who said, yeah, it was almost like not even permission, but he blessed you to leave.
Yeah,
Wow.
absolutely. And and I realized through the journey that I've tried. I've
Mm-hmm.
tried so many times to become a better version of myself,
Mm-hmm.
to become the best who I can. I tried changing, but at the
Mm-hmm.
end of the day, I realized it wasn't about me.
Mm-hmm.
It was about him and what he wants in his life. And it's because I wasn't able to be that wife, be that person he could love
Right.
unconditionally.
Mm-hmm.
And I realized that even though he won't let me go, he won't divorce me, he will continue to torture me if I stay.
Mm-hmm.
And I realized that I deserve better. My
Wow.
girls deserve better. And I real also had the realization that I don't want my girls
Mm-hmm.
to think that this is okay to have a man who abuses you,
Right.
who who don't value you.
Right.
So I made a plan to leave.
Okay. Yeah. I want to pause there because this is not overnight. This is over years, and I want you to share how many years, but yes, us women, we don't want a divorce. We turn over every rock for help, right? We open every door, we check every alternative before we get to the place where we want to get a divorce. Or that's the only way. It's like that's the last door that we avoid. It's the divorce door, but we check every other door, we turn over every other rock. Maybe there are clan negotiations or mediations that you've had too. But you're saying I didn't want to model this for my children. I didn't want them to think that abuse was acceptable. Someone putting their gun to my head is normal. So you're breaking all of these oppressive things that the Hmong culture normalizes. And I'm sure our mothers and grandmothers, they've all gone through it and they decided to stay, but you're saying for you, that's not what you wanted. It was a life or death decision and you weren't going to stay anymore. And I think you also released him. Maybe he didn't have the courage to divorce you, even though he wanted all these other women and things. And so you're like, yeah, I'm going to do this for me and my kids, but I'm going to do this for you too. So you
Yeah,
can be free.
absolutely. And oftentimes in an infidelity, we often blame the other woman. And that's what I started at the beginning. I'm like, I was mad at the other woman, right?
Mm-hmm.
But when I started loving myself and I
Mm-hmm.
started seeing his toxicity
Mm-hmm.
show up,
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, I stopped blaming the other woman. And I
Yeah.
said, you know what? It's him. It's
Yeah.
him that is destroying us.
Mm-hmm.
And if he doesn't want me, I need to let him go. So when I was able to, inside my heart, let him go, I
Mm-hmm.
made a plan. And I started making plans and saying, okay, my youngest daughter was 2.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm like thinking of who's going to watch my baby if
Mm-hmm.
I was to leave because my in-laws wouldn't be able to watch my babies anymore.
Mm-hmm.
They wouldn't be committed as they used to be. Where would I live? How
Mm-hmm.
would I pay for my bills? And
Right.
I had to get everything in my mind, everything in order, my
Sure.
ducks in a row
Mm-hmm.
to be able to make this happen. But it took me about 3 months, three, four, actually 4.5 months before I actually
Oh,
made my move to leave. And so
okay.
during this time frame, I was figuring out all these things without telling
Okay.
anybody except my family. My mom. I had a conversation with my mom. I said, "Mom, this is not gonna it's not going to happen. The
Mm,
marriage isn't going to work out. And that was after had talked to the grandpa, and my mom just said, just come home. Your
mm.
dad, your dad and I will love you no matter what.
Wow. Your
And so,
parents supported you.
yeah, absolutely. And so within that time frame, I was able to get things ready in a row, and I decided that he didn't want to divorce me. I decided that I didn't want to tell him that I want to divorce him because I knew how many guns he had. I knew
Sure.
the anger issues that he had, the toxicity issues that he had.
Mm-hmm.
So I decided to leave on a really quiet note. I
Okay.
one day, I after he went to work early in the morning, I had a
Mhm.
U-Haul waiting, and I packed all my stuff into the
Okay.
U-Haul, and I took everything
Wow.
and I left the house. I'm like, I don't care about this house. I care about my children and my things.
Mm.
So so I left, and he didn't know. His family
Okay.
didn't know. Nobody knew
Okay.
except my mom and
Okay.
my family. And my girls didn't know what was going on.
Okay.
And I took everything and I left.
And how long had you been married up to this point?
15 years.
15 years.
Yep. 15
Okay,
years.
so you invested 15 years. I'm sure you tried to change yourself because of the narrative. Oftentimes it's our fault. We can't have sons, we can't have kids. Maybe we're not feeding his palate, right? We flip over every rock, we change ourselves. But even though you kept trying to make him happy, his character started to change and his personality, and he started getting worse. And so for you, like that was evidence of like this is not going to work because he's getting scarier with his
Yeah.
actions. And so your parents, they supported you, they opened their home, their arms to you, and then you left. And so how was that getting through that phase of, okay, I made the decision, I packed everything, and I'm gone now?
Yeah. After I left that house, I never looked back. I'm like,
Okay.
I'm never going back to that house of hell. I left, and then I had to restart my life. Where am I going to go from here? I'm living
Mm-hmm.
with my parents. They're helping my brothers. They're helping, and my family's helping with my children, trying to
Mm-hmm.
figure out um, where I see myself in the next year, the next 10,
Okay.
15, 20 years. Where do I go? So I
Mm-hmm.
really had to work on that self-heal, but also did a lot of reading and a lot of research on how do I help support my girls through
Mm-hmm.
this, because divorce isn't easy. And a lot of
No.
times, like when my parents were getting divorced, it was just shove it under the rug. We didn't talk about it, right? But
Right.
now it's like I have to find ways to do better for my girls. And thank goodness for my mother-in-law, my brothers and sister-in-laws, my side of the family. My girls are did better because of them, because I had to
Mm-hmm.
focus on me,
Okay.
healing me. I was just starting
Yeah.
to heal myself
Right.
after years and years of depression.
Okay.
And so I started that process, and I just never looked back. And I just said,
Mhm.
you know what? This actually is the best decision I've ever made. And
Wow.
so after we got our divorce um, finalized and everything, then at first I was like, I'm not going to remarry. I hate Hmong men.
Mhm.
They're
Mhm.
horrible.
Yeah.
I don't want to marry anyone else. And then a part of me, in order for me to heal,
Mhm.
I started traveling. I had never traveled on an airplane all my life.
Wow.
Well, my ex-husband did, but I didn't, because I was always told, well, we can't go because of the kids.
Sure.
So I was always home. And so I started traveling to heal. I started reading books to heal.
Mhm.
I started um just to take really good care of myself. I finished my master's degree and I was like, should I go get my doctorate? You know,
Yeah.
education was my life. And so I
Wow.
started doing that. And then I started, then I started saying, you know what? Let's open my heart again and let's talk to people.
Yeah.
Maybe he's just a bad straw. And so
Mm.
I started talking to, meeting people online
Mm-hmm.
and just friends, not even serious about dating at all, just being friends with
Sure.
the opposite gender, right?
Mm-hmm.
And what I realized is that I am not going to be like dating other people's married men because I
Mm-hmm.
hated what my dad did. I
Right.
hated what what my ex-husband did. I'm not going to date married men, period. And
Mm-hmm.
so I was very careful about who I talked to. And sometimes you don't know, right? Because these
Yeah.
people are so crazy. But I did not get myself involved in anyone who um I didn't believe that had my values. And by this time, I was in my mid 30s, and my
Mm.
values
Yeah.
changed from when I
Mm.
was young. I had these really high values that I would not take just anybody off the
Yeah. So you
street.
had a set standard and you weren't going to lower that or settle.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I
And
want to
so mhm.
I want to go I want to go a few steps back because I think our listeners or viewers might have this question. So, when you got a divorce, was it a so were you legally married?
Yes.
Okay, so then you had to get divorced through the court system.
Mhm.
Prior to that, had you ever left him before? Because I know you left and you didn't tell anybody, but sometimes women will leave and they'll come back. So did you ever leave him before?
Yeah. One time I left because I was really mad at him. I left for a few
Okay.
days and then
Okay.
I came back. But
Okay.
I don't consider that like leaving and then, never coming, like having it finalized, right? But
Right.
I was so mad at him. I just left to go to my
Okay.
mom's house just to
Okay.
debrief and kind of try to figure
Yeah.
out things.
Had you had any clan mediations throughout?
No. Mm-mm.
Okay.
No.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, so I mean, everyone has a different story and there's no right or wrong, but those are just some questions because some people they may have tried clan mediations or they may have, lalo mong tila ping tiam kia mo ang gao fa, or you've left, for a period of time, but it sounded like you left once, but it was because you were angry and you just needed to decompress. You
Yeah.
needed to cool down and then you came back on your own. Okay.
Hmm.
Okay. All right. So you've left, you've gotten your master's degree, you're traveling, you're doing all of these great things. And I just want to highlight that. Do you think you would have gotten a master's degree had you stayed in the marriage, had you been taking care of him and the kids and doing all your wife duties and daughter-in-law duties? Do you think you would have made the time or had the time to pursue higher education?
I was pursuing it
Oh, you
during
were.
that time
Okay.
frame when he was having his affair, right? And so
Okay.
during the day I would go to work, come back home, take care of my girls, and then at night, because he was hardly around, I would study at night.
Okay.
And it was in my dream whether or not he was there or I was married to him or not, I was gonna go and get that degree and so
Yeah.
forth. So I was determined.
Yes, a go-getter.
Mhm.
Okay, awesome. Okay, so you have the standard. You were like, I'm not dating people's husbands.
Mhm.
I don't want to deal with that. Maybe I'm just gonna meet people, right? And I have a standard, and we'll see where things go. So then, what happened after that?
Yeah, so I met my husband, and so we were good friends for a while, and then
Mhm.
he's a single man, and he was um in his late 30s, and so he was ready to settle down, and I was like, why me? And he said, well, he wanted to have somebody who was a go-getter and wasn't
Mhm.
very dependent on him. and was financially stable. So I'm like, oh, okay. Even though I had five baggages, right? Even though I have all five of my girls and so
Yeah.
forth, he was like, it's okay. As long as we have the same values, we both love traveling, we both have the very similar values. And so I was, at first I was like, oh, I don't know. I'm not sure if this is right. But at the end of the day, I realized, you know what? I really do want to show my girls, what a good man among man can be, right?
Mm-hmm.
He's not
Mm-hmm.
perfect. There are flaws,
Right.
but it's much better than what they saw in their dad.
Mm-hmm.
And so that I decided, you know what? I'm gonna move on and I'm gonna remarry. And because he was a bachelor, he wanted kids. I didn't finish my family. I don't have boys. So I'm
Yeah.
like, I want to keep on trying, with the right person. And so we did get married. I think it was like 2 years after I had gotten divorced.
Mm-hmm.
Was it 2 or 3? 2, 3 years after I got
Mm-hmm.
divorced, we had gotten married. And it's when I think about the journey, it's night and day. When you marry
Mm.
someone who has high values like you, even though things aren't perfect,
Yeah.
at the end of the day, you understand each other. You
Yeah.
can you have a better relationship with one another. And
Mm.
I always tell him, you were a godsend to me because
Yeah.
I was so broken. And you
Mm.
came and you listened to my story, you listened to my past, you took my imperfection, you took on in my taking in my girls to live with us.
Mm.
You did everything what I dreamed of, and you loved me unconditionally.
Mm.
And like I was always when people see me again, I'm
Yeah.
like, yep, you got to marry somebody who treats you like a princess. And this is how I
Oh.
teach my girls now. Someone who
Yeah.
treats you like a princess so that after you have your baby, they take care of you for 30 days. I'm like, I never
Yeah.
had that with my
Mm-hmm.
girls, with their father. And now, it's like with my boys, after I had my baby, he took care of the baby and he cooked for me for the whole 30 days. And
Oh.
I'm like, you know what? This is what love is. When you
Yeah.
love somebody unconditionally, you want, and you know that their body's going through a lot, they're going through a lot. You help them out. You let them, you remove these expectations. When we first got
Yeah.
married, I cooked every night. I kept the house clean all the time. And he's just said, you know what? You're so stressed. You don't even have time to take care of yourself. Why do you have
Yeah.
to cook for us every night? I could cook for the boys, the girls can find food. You don't have to do this all the time. You don't have to wash my clothes. I could do it. I'm a grown man. And I just
Wow.
realized that was the first time he said that. I'm like, oh my God, all these things I've been doing all these years that has taken time
Yeah.
away from me being able to take care of myself. You mean
Yeah.
I don't have to live up to this Mong Ya expectation? So I'm
Mm-hmm.
like, phew. So
Yeah.
I really feel like I'm living, I get to do what I want to do. I
Yeah.
really feel all the expectation of a Mong Ya
Mm-hmm.
is many of it has disappeared because
Yeah.
my partner now is so much more Americanized. He understands me
Mm-hmm.
and he helps me out, not feeling like, oh,
Yeah.
and so forth. But he really
Yeah.
does it because he loves me and he knows the
Mm.
trauma I've had from my past marriage. And he
Yeah.
really has been a good supporter and just a
Mm.
partner in life.
Yeah. So what a huge turnaround because you were saying, "Oh, I don't want to date another Hmong man," and you went out on a limb and you took a risk, and that can be very scary. And then you found somebody, a bachelor, someone who had never been married. You don't have to deal with baby mama drama or ex-wife drama. And I think that's huge because I think a lot of the narrative for us Hmong women and being a divorcee, or we keep saying "Pundaw na," they're saying, yeah, no one wants your baggage. who's gonna want you, right? Who's gonna want you if you've had 5 kids or now you have the name of a bundle, but you found somebody who wanted you. He truly wanted you, and no wonder you're so happy and smiling because your life is a ton better being with this new person who gets you. And it's like you married him, but you kept the same mentality of being among Nya and among wife and stuff. But he was like, no, I can do my own clothes. I can wash my own clothes. And he kind of relieved that burden. And I think that's so awesome that a partner can say to you, I care about your mental health. I care about your physical health. And so lighten the load. You're a little too stressed,
Mhm.
right? And so many of us women, we keep busy because it's actually a trauma response. I don't know if you knew that, but it's a trauma response to just keep doing, doing, doing. And it's like we need to jump off the hamster wheel, and we have the power to create our own schedule and to change and to take care of ourselves. But what a beautiful story. You're saying it's not perfect, but you're so much happier. And I think everyone can tell with just that big, bright, beautiful smile you have.
Absolutely. Life is too short. Life
Mm,
is too short not to love yourself. Life
mhm.
is too short not to have a partner who have the
Yeah.
same values, who share the same dreams as you.
Mm,
And so you have to make the best out of what you have. And like I said, no marriage is perfect. My current
yeah.
marriage is not perfect. There's
Hmm.
still a lot of things that we got to work on,
Yeah.
but at the end of the day, you know, he's happy, I'm happy. Hopefully my children are happy. And you know what?
Yeah.
We have to always continue to work on relationships, right? No
Yeah.
relationship is perfect. And so
Right.
it's always a journey to um, closing up those relationships so that they can be better. And
Hmm.
through the decades, my relationships with my girls still need a lot of work on because
Hmm.
there's been so much trauma that has happened
Right.
through the years. And I always tell them that, I'm at the beginning, they didn't realize that they wanted to that getting divorcing their dad was a good thing. They were like, no, no, no. But then at
Hmm.
the end of the day, when they saw how happy I was, and they
Yeah.
saw that they actually have freedom,
Hmm.
they were like, Mom, that was the best thing you ever did. You got us out of that toxic household. And now
Yeah.
we can actually thrive and live the dream of our lives. And that's what I want to tell my girls,
Hmm.
that you don't have to be with a man to live under their control, that you can be
Right.
independent, you can find
Hmm.
happiness, and don't marry somebody just because of my big just because of my life with their dad. Find
Yeah.
somebody who's gonna be that life partner, who's gonna make them happy, right? So through all of this, I hope that I've given my girls some hope that
Hmm.
not all Hmong men are bad. There are
Right.
good ones. But you
Yes.
just have to be patient. You have to open up your eyes, have lots of good conversations, and find that right person that fits you.
Yes. All right, I have a couple questions before we wrap up. The
Sure.
first thing I would say is for someone who doesn't know how to love themselves, if they're like, okay, I guess I could buy makeup and clothes, but like, what does love look like from the inside out? What's some advice you would give the listeners?
Yeah. Well, the minute I was remember I told you with that final straw, 4.5
Hmm.
months out, I've
Yeah.
already started forgiving my ex partner, my ex-husband.
Okay.
And forgiveness is a part of self-love. And
Okay.
forgiving him for what he did to me
Okay.
and just letting it go. It's
Okay.
very hard to do.
Hmm.
I think you could say it, but inside your heart, it takes a long time.
Hmm.
So that forgiveness is the beginning stage, and then forgiving yourself. You
Yeah.
don't know what you don't know during that time frame, and so forgiving yourself, um, so that you can also heal and
Mhm.
find the better version of you.
Mm.
Self-love is really hard at the beginning because you don't even know where to start.
Yeah.
But self-love, a lot the self-love that can help you to the next level is not the physical self-love like wearing beautiful stuff, makeup and things like that, but it's around your own internal thinking of caring for yourself, putting yourself first and not being don't think it's selfish and
Mhm.
not feeling guilty
Mhm.
and speaking up for yourself. Oh no, I can't do that. Um, and being able to make time for yourself. Making
Yeah.
time for yourself is really hard when you have a lot of kids like me and everybody
Yeah.
around and saying, you know what, I actually need a mini vacation or a girls' vacation
Mhm.
away for a little bit. You know, doing and also surrounding yourself with people who are not toxic. This was one
Mhm.
an advice I had gotten
Mm.
from my sister, and it's really helped me also to do more self-love because when you have a lot of toxicity
Mhm.
around you, especially in people, then it really pulls your journey of self-love down. And so I
Mhm.
started removing people that didn't have the same values that were toxic. And at the end of the day, I was surrounding myself with people who actually embraced me and actually wanted to support me.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so at the end of the day, you got to surround yourself with people who are going to uplift you and not
Mhm.
pull you down because, it can be very dangerous to be around other people, family, or other women who are all like chasing after the same man and so forth. And that's not self-love,
Absolutely.
right? But
Yeah.
self-love is really giving being around people who will support you and who have um the same dreams as you so that you can get together and heal together
Wow.
to get to a better place.
All right. Well, my last question for you is if there's somebody contemplating divorce, maybe they're in a position where they are being abused or there's infidelity, or maybe they're just realizing that their partner and them, they're falling out of love, whatever it may be. Um, what advice would you give somebody who's contemplating divorce and who's maybe been thinking about it for a while? What would you say to them?
A lot of people ask me this and and thinking I'm like, hmm. I think I have the life that I have now because
Mhm.
I did everything that I needed to do and I don't have any regrets. I don't have
Okay.
regrets of, man, I should have been more patient. I should have done this and done that. I don't have any regrets because I gave in my all. So I feel like for people who are struggling, should I
Mhm.
go? Should I stay? Did you give it your all?
Okay.
Did you try your best? And if you did and nothing is working out, then maybe it's time to move on.
Mm.
And it's not easy to move on until you had that last straw. And that
Yeah.
last straw is different for everyone.
Right.
And so it really is going to be a very, very difficult journey ahead.
Mhm.
But just know that if you gave it your all, the other side of the rainbow will be much brighter.
Okay.
But if you didn't give it your all, then you may have regrets later on. But knowing what I know,
Mhm.
I always tell my husband, I'm like, why didn't I leave earlier? Like in 2001, when
Yeah.
it happened, when my ex-husband was cheating the first time, why didn't I just leave?
Yeah.
And he goes, well, I wasn't ready to marry at that point. So I'm like, okay, so maybe God. Um,
Yeah.
it wasn't meant to be yet. And
Right.
so I had to wait until it was the right time. But
Yeah.
I always also tell people that um if if they don't treat you like a princess and how you
Mhm.
want to live life, then maybe it's time to take the next step forward after you give it your all.
Mm,
But don't wait too long because
okay.
I think my situation, I waited too long and
Okay.
all that trauma, all the things, all the abuses that happened, ended up with me collecting a lot of trauma that took years and years to heal. So
Yeah.
don't wait too long either,
Okay.
because that also hurts you as well in the long term
Mm.
and so forth.
So you left again, you wanted to leave with a clear conscience. You turned over every rock and you were saying, I've done absolutely everything that I could. And so I can leave. And even if I do look back, I can say, I've done everything. I did everything. I tried my darnest. And so if people haven't, if they're still going to have regrets, or I could have done this, or I could have done this, then you're saying maybe it's not right. Um, and you said you stayed long, but your now husband wasn't ready to get married at that time. And I think sometimes we, even in the trauma, we get to find out more about ourselves. And so sometimes we're not ready, whether it's psychologically, with tangible things like we don't have our ducks in a row, we haven't paid off our debt. There's just so many things. So for everyone, you're right, it is unique. Okay, but I want to ask one last question. My question would be, what would you say for people who are married, and you can think about your current marriage, what makes a good marriage, or what works for you and your now husband?
Well, we like I tell my girls, we have our differences. We have very similar values and dreams,
Mhm.
but we have our differences. And
Mhm.
with our differences, we talk it through. It's
Okay.
not like my way or the highway.
Mhm.
We share our perspectives. We don't fight. After sharing our perspectives, we leave it there. We respect each other. Communication is just so important in a marriage. And
Mm.
I know like a lot of among men, sometimes they don't like to communicate. And
Yeah.
so when they don't like to communicate, you just have to remind them the importance of a communication and so forth. So lots of discussions and even sometimes um sometimes I feel like, oh, he doesn't help me enough, but it's because I also don't express my needs too. So
Okay.
if you need something, you need to express it. And
Yeah.
sometimes the answer might be no. Sometimes the
Okay.
answer might be yes. But if you don't express it, then how will he know? How will your partner know, right? And
Yeah.
so that's also really important. And just to really keep an open mind, and trust each other. Trust was very hard for me at
Mhm.
the beginning, but I'm learning to trust again,
Okay.
and so forth. And then also this second time around, I also have a lot of self-love for me.
Mm.
I put myself first, and I'm not feeling guilty or anything. I do
Okay.
love him a lot, but I always love me first. And
Okay.
I feel like when you love yourself first, no matter what ends up at the end, whether we all know that, we're going to die, we all know that divorce could be a possibility, that when
Mhm.
we do love ourselves first and foremost, when those things happen, it won't break us as hard. So
Yeah.
that was a life lesson learned from the first marriage to the second marriage and so forth.
Okay. All right. Well, I just want to thank you so much for being my first guest speaker. I think you have so much knowledge and experience, and it sounds like healing is not like there's no end point, right? Like we continue to heal and work through some of those things and layers come up. But I just love your positivity, your joy. You are just so bright. So again, Bob, thank you so much for joining us. And I'm wondering, would you allow me to say a prayer for
Yeah,
us here at the
absolutely.
end? All right. Okay. So let's pray. Heavenly Father, Lord, I thank you so much for Ba. She has such a beautiful spirit, Lord. I thank you for helping her overcome. I just ask, Lord, that you would continue to bless her, that she would continue to be a light. She would continue to use her voice that you have given her to inspire, to encourage, and to give hope. Father, I pray that you continue to heal her as she continues this healing journey. Lord, I pray that you would bless her marriage. I pray that you would bless her children. I pray that, Lord, that you would give her the desires of her heart and that you would send people to her, Lord, who need to hear her story, who need to be inspired, who need a little bit of strength, Lord. I thank you so much for her. And I just pray, Lord, that she and I may have an opportunity to collaborate again. But I am so thankful to you, God, for her. And I just speak blessing over her, good health, joy, love, happiness, abundance, and prosperity. We pray all these things in Jesus' name. Amen.
All right. Thank you for having me.